So, welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, at Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make resources such as books and courses and information for other potters who want to be more eco-conscious in their pottery practice but maybe don't know where to start or can't find out the information they need. So that's what this podcast is all about. It's about sharing everything I've learned along my eco-conscious pottery journey with you, and I can't wait to get started. So let's go. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Tomlinson, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about an amazing way to get a flat rim or a flat base on your pot. So this is such a cool technique that I've discovered fairly recently, and now I pretty much use it on like all my pottery. Um, so this is say like if you cut a pot off the wheel and it's got like an uneven base, or you're trying to make the rim of a pot really sort of even. Flat and even, and it just looks really sharp. This technique will just revolutionize your pottery. It's so good. So I actually first read about this technique in a book where they were talking about using chamois leather for this technique. But what I found out is that you actually don't need to use leather. So I have a practice where I don't use any animal products or tools like in my pottery. And so I wondered whether I could actually do the same technique with a cotton cloth, and you actually can, and it's actually brilliant. So here's what you do. You basically take a cloth, so a tea towel is absolutely brilliant for this. Because they're already hemmed and they're like the perfect size. And you want a cloth which has got quite a fine grain to it. So if you think about some tea towels with like kind of quite like a big weave. You don't want that. You want like a sort of fine cloth with not much texture to it. And then what you do is you dip your cloth in water and wring it out. You're not wringing it out till it's like really, really dry. You still want a little bit of moisture in there. Um, but you don't want it like sopping wet. So kind of in between the two, in between how you'd wring it out if you were like trying to dry something, and then it being sopping wet, you kind of want something like in the middle. And then what you do is you take your tea towel and you just stretch it over something that's really, really flat. So for this, I use a slate. You could use like maybe like a wooden board, or you could even use like a piece of stone, or like a flagstone or something if you could fold the tea towel underneath. um, but you want it to be like something that you can pull the tea towel around, the cloth around, and kind of tuck underneath, because you don't want that cloth to move as you're doing this technique. So yeah, so a slate is perfect 'cause it's quite heavy, or chopping board or something like that, some kind of wooden board or something. As long as it's perfectly flat, this technique will be like absolutely brilliant. So fold the cloth underneath the board, and then what you do is you just take your pot. So you take, say, like a pot with like a slightly uneven rim or uneven base, and you just take the pot and you just twist it very gently on top of the wet cloth. And the twisting action, so you don't want to press it that hard, and you don't want to like do it loads. You're literally just doing it a tiny bit, and then you can kind of stop and have a look. And that will just make a completely even, beautifully kind of sharp base. It kind of like wipes the base all at the same time, and on a flat surface. So you'll get like a lovely, like sharp edge, and it's so good. So then what you can do is you can then just kind of, when it's maybe a little bit drier, just like sponge around it just to get any of those bits of clay that might have come off like around the side. I just do a final sponge to kind of like get those little bits off the rim, and then the rim or base is like super sharp, and it just looks so good. So in terms of like what stage of pottery to do this at, you can do it with bone dry pottery if you want to do like a finishing off kind of like just before it's fired. But it's really pottery can be very brittle and delicate at that stage, so it's quite a good idea to do it when the pot is a little bit wetter. But I would say maybe it's slightly drier than leather hard clay, because um, it can still warp, you can still kind of end up damaging the shape of the pot, especially if you've got quite a thin pot and you're, doing this technique on the rim, you can end up kind of like, accidentally squashing in the sides of the pot or something. So make sure your pot is like maybe a little bit drier than leather hard before you do this technique. And yeah, it'll be absolutely brilliant. So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that like tip about how to make a perfectly flat rim or base. And like I said, I use this technique pretty much every time I make a pot because it just gives such a good sharp edge. And then you can kind of, if you want to just round it off a little bit, you can just sponge it, and it just makes your pot look so good. So yeah, I've loved talking to you about this technique, and yeah, I hope it's helpful to you. And really looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. And I'll see you soon. Bye bye. Oh, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you're interested to learn more about eco conscious pottery or making your pottery more eco conscious and sustainable, there's so much for you on the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. I can't wait to see you there.